Welcome back, Wolfpack. Fox Trevize here. Direwolf is having some technical difficulties. Oh, there he is. Oh, wait, there he goes. It could just be Skype. Skype is like the worst program.
We called each other at the same time twice.
No, I called you like 5 times and you didn't answer.
I only didn't answer because I wasn't here. But the last two calls were what I said at the same time.
Everybody, Direwolf, this is everybody.
Hello, everybody. So, have you said anything yet other than the fact that I'm late?
I said, welcome back, Wolfpack, and then you tried to call back. And then while I was trying to answer the Skype call, I explained how Skype was awful, and that has now caught us back up to where we're at now.
Yes, Skype is indeed awful, and we should stop using it, but we don't have an alternative that isn't also sucky.
It would probably take us about 10 minutes to Google what a good alternative is and use that instead.
I have two other alternatives that I use with the military, and they also suck for different reasons.
Yeah, they're made by the lowest bidder.
Yeah, but beside that, they also suck. All right, so speaking of things that suck, let's talk about a recent news story about someone who was using their right to self-defense and their Second Amendment rights. And then let's see what happened with that.
Yes, so you guys know, that was a great cold open, Dyer. You guys know what happened last weekend in St. Louis. It is the infamous case of the Ken and Karen out there defending their mansion with their guns that they may or may not know how to use. We're going to go with may not. But it is their right, regardless, to defend their property. And there was two stories as to what happened here. The first story came from the left, saying that Ken and Karen were evil white supremacists pointing their rifles at Black Lives Matter protesters, which mostly consisted of white people rioting. Strange how that works. And then the other side was the right that was, while relentlessly making fun of them for how they were holding their weapons, was also very, sympathetic to their plight of having people roll through their neighborhood and on the warpath to go looking for causing trouble. As we know, the riots all across the nation have very rarely left their rioting area intact.
Yeah, I mean, so they obviously were there to cause damage and to intimidate people. And at the point that before the Ken and Karen came out, they had already caused damage because they had to break through a gate to get into the community in the first place.
Yes.
So it wasn't like they hadn't already demonstrated they were willing to destroy someone's property, as they already had.
Exactly. So we are, along with those two narratives, there was two interviews, I believe 2 nights ago. A lot of twos here. One was with Tucker Carlson, and he got to interview Ken, who I don't remember what his name is, so we're just going to keep calling him Ken. And then Ken, also after interviewing with Tucker, went on to Chris Cuomo's show on CNN. We are going to watch both interviews in full. It's about 15, 16 minutes worth of interviews. We'll probably just let the Tucker one play through, and then we will respond to the Cuomo one probably as it's playing. But I'm trying to share my screen with you, Dyer, so if you would like to...
Yeah, so what you should understand, like one concept you should get when you have finished watching the two clips, is it should be very clear that there's two Americas, two realities, two worlds that exist, that some people on either side believe in one but not the other. But it's like we live in a twilight zone, that these two realities can exist in people's minds at the same time, and they're so polar opposites. You'd wonder how can we have two completely opposite stories about one story?
Well, and it's it kind of gets back into this idea of the Orwellian doublethink, where the left has made criminals those who would be law-abiding citizens, and made law-abiding citizens of those who would break the law.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. So let's so this clip that we're gonna watch first is Tucker Carlson. I'm gonna play about a minute of the clip before I jump ahead, because Tucker kind of recaps the whole situation and also goes into a little bit of detail as to what the city of St. Louis is trying to do to this couple. And I'll skip ahead a little bit, and then we'll get into the actual interview with Tucker. Sound good?
Yep.
Alrighty.
A St. Louis couple called Mark and Patricia McCloskey became folk heroes to many across the country after they were confronted by a mob, a dangerous mob, outside their home, and returned with firearms to protect it and themselves. This is what you were taught to do. It's what generations of Americans have done. It's the most basic right of all, the right of self-defense. The McCloskeys exercised that right, and now they're coming close to being destroyed. They stood up for themselves against the mob. The McCloskeys' fate remains in the hands of the mob in the form of this.
Yeah, we'll remember this picture here. This is a picture of a wrought iron gate. It's a historic wrought iron gate, apparently. Apparently it's been there for a very long time. Which actually, probably after this, we watch these interviews. I'm actually familiar with this particular area of St. Louis, and so I'll maybe discuss a little bit more about the context of where this area is and what it means that this mob came through here. But you can clearly see this wrought iron gate was torn to shreds, and I want you guys to remember that image. I'll probably bring it back up and put it in the background. Remember that image for when they're doing the Chris Cuomo interview. But this wrought iron gate, clearly they went through it, and it was not because the gate was open.
No.
The St. Louis Circuit Attorney General Kimberly Gardner. Gardner is a radical prosecutor, one of many elected in recent years, with financial backing from billionaire George Soros. In 2019.
So I'm going to skip ahead about a minute here. So what Tucker is going to do is go through the history of this prosecutor here, which, while it's very interesting, it's less relevant to the current story. But basically, she's a radical. She has, during her tenure as the Attorney General of St. Louis, she has used that power to basically just allow as many criminals and radicals to go free as possible, and make sure that all of the good boy cops are being prosecuted when they're just doing their job. She is essentially the Kimberly Fox of, if you guys remember, Kimberly Fox let Jussie Smollett out of all his trouble in Chicago, and then she's very recently this week has let like hundreds of rioters just go free without charging them. So
at a certain point,
this is the Kimberly Fox of St. Louis.
At a certain point, the radical left, the Marxist types, figured out how much power prosecutors have and how they can basically selectively enforce laws by choosing who they will actually bring charges against.
Yes. And she's got George Soros funding, which Tucker also goes into, which I'm sure you guys know about George Soros, but that's outside the scope of tonight's discussion. So now we're going to get into Tucker is going to talk he's going to show a clip of the prosecutor once again talking about how she is going to specifically go after this couple and try to prosecute them. And then it's going to just go right into the interview for about 4 or 5 minutes. So we'll watch that. You have anything interesting to say, Dyer?
The lack of her trigger discipline is really unnerving in this video.
Yeah,
it's a miracle there wasn't. It's a miracle there wasn't a escalation or possible discharge.
I wanna. Somebody needs to do like an analysis on like the Karen and Ken like loadout, like the apocalypse loadout for your pistol and your rifle there. Alrighty.
McCloskeys defended themselves. Gardner finally found a crime she cares about. She promised to have them punished if she could.
I am disturbed by the events that occurred over this weekend where there were peaceful protesters who were met with guns and a violent assault.
Why?
We must protect the rights to peacefully protest
On post-
and any attempts to chill it.
What's that?
There's two obvious lies. First off, shit, they were peacefully protesting. No, if peaceful protesters not tear down wrought iron gates, and also all the video evidence of how these protesters have not at any point been peaceful. And then she said that they came at them with violence.
Yeah, so
What violence?
in the interview, pay attention to when Mr. Ken describes why he felt the need to get guns out, and he starts citing the history of what's been going on in the country, and specifically what's gone on in St. Louis, and he'll go into that. So make sure to pay special attention to that part.
Through intimidation or use of force will not be tolerated. Since learning of these events over this weekend, I've worked with the public.
The use of intimidating a mob of people from your own lawn.
Actually, that's what the Second Amendment is partially for, is to provide the intimidating force that will prevent someone from trying to hurt you in the first place. That is a intended purpose of the Second Amendment.
And yeah, we'll definitely reiterate that for the Cuomo part of this, because Cuomo over and over again goes, well, they didn't actually do anything to you. Yeah, Cuomo, because he had a gun out.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah, you're supposed to be like dead and burned by the mob before you're allowed to start like shooting at them, basically.
And the police to investigate these tragic events. I will use every extent of Missouri law to hold individuals accountable.
Mark McCloskey joins us tonight along with his attorney, Albert Watkins. Mr. McCloskey, first to you, thanks so much for coming on. And I'm glad you're on because you will tell your own story rather than having it told for you by ideologues. Describe for us, if you would, why you believed you and your wife were threatened by these 300 people in your yard.
Well, Tucker, you got to understand, my house sits right on the edge of a road called Kings Highway, and our private place is Portland Place, where my wife and I were preparing to have dinner, maybe 70 feet from the gate. By the time we looked up and we saw the marchers coming down Kings Highway and getting loud, we looked over at the gate, and there's no police there. Our private security wasn't there. Nobody was there. And I look over at my wife, and I see all these people outside the gate, and then the gate bursts open. People start coming in, and then a flood of people start coming in. They're angry, they're screaming, they've got spittle coming out of their mouth. They're coming towards the house. And you know, on June the 2nd of this year, the protests in downtown St. Louis went violent instantly. People, the looting and violence and rioting. I watched on live TV the 7-Eleven in downtown St. Louis. From the moment the first window was broken, throughout the looting process, till the fire was started, and then till the fire fully engaged the building, and nobody came that entire time. I looked over at my wife and I said, oh my God, we're absolutely alone. There's nobody here to...
And I remember that, you know, where he's watching all of the stuff the last month. He sees the police standing down all over the country. He sees them standing down in St. Louis. He sees them burning buildings down, destroying untold amounts of property, and just having no regard for human life. And the police are not there. His security's not there. And he says, we're alone. And that's something that I have said multiple times this month and in previous shows. But that is unfortunately the situation that we're at, is for the most part, you are on your own unless you know for sure that you've got somebody else that's got your back. But certainly in the big cities, you can no longer count on the police having your back. It would be irresponsible for you to think that the police have
unrealistic, because they've shown that they've shown themselves not to be able to respond to or protect any of the citizens in this area for a very long time. So this person knows he's being rational. He's the only one that's going to be able to take care of himself and his family. And he's right. There's been buildings that in homes have been destroyed, and there's a very little lag time between the protesters getting there and the property being destroyed and people getting hurt. So he did the right thing.
Yeah, and I don't relish that prospect that that the civil society is broken down to the point where our law enforcement cannot be counted upon to enforce the law. and that you really are on your own in a Wild West sense. But this guy realized that, and a lot more people need to realize that too. And I hope that there's a lot of other people, other homeowners watching what they're going to do to this guy, what the city is trying to do to this guy, what the Black Lives Matter mob is doing to this guy, and realize that you'll be next. There's no reason why you wouldn't be next. It's just, he probably thought, this could happen to me, but he didn't know. It could be any street. It could be your street next, and they will treat you the same way. You unfortunately, again, don't relish this, but you are on your own to the extent that you cannot rely on the state anymore. And maybe Trump can fix some of that, but in the current situation, the state will not be able to protect you. I'm sure all the NCAPs are out there like, yeah, of course. All the libertarians, yeah, of course. But that doesn't change the fact that there is some expectation, and there has been some expectation, that is how the current situation works, how our system works. Whether you like it or not, that's how it was supposed to work. But it is no longer working like that. It is no longer that the state is using your tax dollars to enforce the common good. The state is using your tax dollars to enforce the, I guess the Marxist good.
Protect us but us. That was the same night retired police captain David Doran was murdered. When I saw that mob come till the fire fully engaged the building and nobody came that entire time, I looked over at my wife and I said, oh my God, we're absolutely alone. There's nobody here to protect us but us. That was the same night retired police captain David Doran was murdered. When I saw that mob come through the gate with their rage and their anger, I thought that we would be overrun in a second. By the time I was out there with my rifle, the people were 20 or 30 feet from my front wall. I've got a low wall that separates the house from my front yard. And so I was literally afraid that within seconds they would surmount the wall, come into the house, kill us, burn the house down, and everything that I'd worked for and struggled for the last 32 years. Tucker, I lived out in West St. Louis County in a nice, secure neighborhood. 32 years ago, we moved into the city and took on a project to restore a house that nobody else wanted. And we were urban pioneers in those days, and we've been there ever since, working to build and maintain St. Louis in this very historic neighborhood. And I saw it all going up in flames and my life destroyed in an instant. And I did what I thought I had to do to protect my hearth, my home, and my family.
Well, no one was protecting you, and they were screaming at you and threatening to murder your dog and harm you and your wife. What do you make of the attacks on you for doing what we used to believe every homeowner had an obligation to do? Why are they denouncing you as a racist?
I don't understand. And here's the interesting thing. I've spent my career defending people that are defenseless, for people that are having a hard time making their miracle happen, for people that don't have a voice. My black clients love us. The night that this happened, I had some of our black clients calling us up till 2:30 in the morning, telling us how wrong it was the way the press was writing us up, telling how wrong it was that we should be portrayed as racist. This is what I do for a living. I help people that are down and that need a hand, and the people that need a voice. To call us racist is ridiculous, and it had nothing to do with race. I wasn't worried what the race was of the mob that came through my gate. I was worried that I was going to be killed. I didn't care what race they were.
It's disgusting. Very quickly, Mr. Watkins, do you think that the McCloskeys face the risk of being prosecuted in this?
Well, given the fact that we have a political animal in the circuit attorney's office, there is a risk. If the law prevails, long-standing Missouri law prevails, they're fine.
Yep. Boy, we're certainly rooting for you. This is really a revealing moment and a travesty. I'm glad you're well. Thank you for coming on tonight. Mark McCloskey, Albert Watkins. Thank you.
All right, so Howard's here in chats. They're kind of making fun of him for saying urban pioneer. That's actually a term. And so the context for this area of St. Louis, if you're not familiar with I'm sure everybody's familiar with St. Louis's history of being a little bit of a rough neighborhood, right? The city of St. Louis is pretty rough. They have some extremely high crime. One of the, I guess, a little point in their favor, one of the reasons why their national crime statistics are so high is actually because the suburbs, which would normally have fallen inside the city district, the actual legal city boundaries were pulled in so far, they excluded so many residential areas that the population of legal St. Louis is extremely small. So their crime, their like absolute level of crime it's bad, but it's probably not the worst. It's not as bad as Chicago. But if you look at it on a percentage basis, because they have an artificially low residential population, its percentage is way, way higher. Now, that said, it is pretty high. One of my best friends has, he's faced down the barrel of some of that bad crime in St. Louis. And I've actually been to past this area where he's talking about along Kings Highway. And what it is very, very nice, fancy mansions. Obviously, he's very wealthy. I would have maybe for an optics preferred maybe someone a little more middle class to have done this, but I'll take what I can get. That either way. So urban pioneer, what that term means is, as a wealthy person, he was explaining it that nobody wanted that house, and so he went in and bought it, kept it maintained, kept it as a historic area. Certainly was providing a massive tax base on his own to the city of St. Louis. And there's a bunch of little neighborhoods in that area where the whole street is blocked off. The whole street is a private neighborhood, and all of those houses are in there. And outside of that community, outside that street, is the regular abject poverty of St. Louis. And they're kind of these little islands throughout the city proper of this kind of wealthy tax base. And it is called urban pioneering because you're kind of taking a risk by having your property in these areas. And at the time when he did this 30 years ago, kind of the history of what urban pioneering is throughout all of America was this idea of trying to create these little islands of wealth for a tax base in the city. And the hope was that maybe the city would use that tax money to possibly make the rest of the city better. As we see in St. Louis, those little seeds of wealth and prosperity, the city did not adequately use those in the tax base to do anything meaningful.
It's a good strategy if the government actually uses that tax base to actually better the communities around it. The idea is, if you have these whales, these wealthy people in the communities, then they will provide money for better infrastructure that everyone else will enjoy as well. Better parks, better services, because they provide that tax money. Now, a lot of mostly Democrat, but everyone's flawed. A lot of places they do try this strategy, but they end up using the money not to benefit the surrounding community at all. Yeah. So that's why you end up with the islands rather than helping the entire area. Now
they this isn't exactly gentrification. What he really did was a prevention of what they called white flight. It's white flight is racist, gentrification's racist. Just whites aren't allowed to live anywhere, so probably just
stop living.
Have a final solution for them. That said, so what he basically did was a prevention of white flight to try to keep that tax base there back in the 90s. That's what he was trying to do. And it's an altruistic thing. And certainly that historic district is worth preserving. St. Louis is a extremely historic city. And a lot of that has been lost due to just mismanagement of the city. And people like him are, through using it as residency, they are trying to preserve those historic areas to an extent. So he's, I don't think he's a bad guy. And that kind of, so just to kind of, again, to explain the context, this is a very, very rich neighborhood over the course of like a block that is in the center of very low income neighborhoods. That's where this is taking place at.
I don't think we know enough about because this one instance by itself does not tell us whether they are good or bad people at all.
Well, so it sounds like his job is kind of I don't know if it was criminal defense, but he said he represents a lot of minorities.
Civil rights.
Yeah. So it seems like he was, it's kind of an altruistic job. It's I'm sure he's all right.
But yeah, there's also civil rights lawyers that are bad. I'm not saying he is a good or bad person. I'm saying we don't know enough about him to say he's good or bad. But what he's being attacked for, he didn't do.
Yeah.
He wasn't racist, and the few things we do know about him seem positive. For instance, him choosing to be a urban pioneer, I think it's still like a funny term. That actually was him trying to help his community. Him being a civil rights lawyer, which, correct me if I'm wrong, those types of cases tend to not be the most profitable.
Well, you think that, but somehow he's got that house, so I don't know how to square that. But I don't know. That's what we know about him. Maybe he beats his dog. I don't know. But in the context of the current situation, he's being attacked for a lot of things that there isn't evidence for. We maybe don't have the evidence to say that all of these things are evidence that are proof that he's a good person. The way the left is, and we're going to watch Cuomo here in a second, they're using that in the opposite way to try to prove that he's a bad person, trying to prove it's funny. Well, it's like I said earlier, if you're a white person in the city and you leave to the suburbs, it's white flight, and that's racist. If you're a white person in the suburbs and you move to the city, that's gentrification, and that's racist. So, probably just go drown yourself. But that's what Chris Cuomo will do, and that's what the left always does, is they will take these things that are, innocuous, neutral things on their face, and they will ascribe motive to it, typically the motive being that you're a racist. Because everything's racist. Alrighty.
You gotta call it out, all out.
Alright, so that was the Tucker interview, which I think was pretty good. Let's watch the Cuomo interview, which was substantially longer. I might play it at a slightly increased speed because I just cannot handle Chris Cuomo for 10 minutes, but we'll give it a go.
Now joined by Mark McCloskey. He is the St. Louis homeowner we told you about in that video that's all over social media. He and his wife holding guns, keeping protesters away, in their opinion, from their home on a private street. He is an attorney, and the couple also has outside counsel who joins us now, Albert Watkins. Thank you both for joining me.
Indeed.
Counselor and Mr. McCloskey / Counselor, we can talk about the legal rights and the facts. But I want to talk about not having a right, but whether or not something is right first, which is, how do you feel about becoming the face of political...
That's what right off the bat, he's trying to have this, moral argument. Is it moral to have these rights? I will remind everybody that the way rights in America work is different from how rights work in basically every other country and society. In America, these rights that we have, especially the right to bear arms and the right to pursue property and liberty and all that stuff, the thing, those were inalienable. They existed before the government came into existence. It pre-existed the government. It wasn't given by the government. It was something that is inherent to you as a human being in the universe. Therefore, Cuomo's question, is it morally right? It might be your right, but is it morally right? That's so. It's so.
What is he asking? Is it morally right to defend your own life?
Well,
yes.
He's questioning whether or not it's morally right to have had these rights that precede government. These rights that you were born with, given to you by God, Creator, the universe, whatever you want to believe it was given to you by, but it wasn't given to you by the government. And Cuomo's saying, well, was it moral for the universe to give you these rights? And so it's a question that doesn't really make sense in the context of how the left views the government, how the left views rights, is that they believe that the government creates these rights and then gifts them to you benevolently. And they can also take them away. But that these rights come from the government. And so if a right is created by a government, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's moral. And so it would make sense to question the morality of a right that was created by a human government. But it doesn't make sense to question the morality of a right that you were born with and was given to you by the universe. Does that make sense?
No, the comment did not make sense. Yours did, but they did.
Well, yeah. Well, I said it makes sense. Okay. So just keep that in mind, that Chris Cuomo even asking this question means that he fundamentally does not understand the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence and how America works. You know, it's funny. You got all these leftists that think, America's so awful. But maybe it's because they don't understand how it works. The idea that the American government exists to not give you rights, but to protect rights that pre-exist it, that is so novel, such a new and novel concept for humanity, such a massive leap in political technology, that is how our government works. And the left just doesn't understand that. They fundamentally cannot get their heads around it. And because they don't understand it, they're like, well, I think it's bad. It's like, well, if you understood what it was, they're saying it's bad without even knowing what it is.
So he's also, at the very beginning of the statement, said that in their opinion, they were protecting themselves from the protesters / rioters. What do you mean in his opinion? They did choose to go around his house and not mess with it because they had guns. They went past even faster. So it looks like it was successful, according to the video evidence. What do you mean, in your opinion?
Yeah, Chris Cuomo's opinion is very valuable. All right, well, we'll watch that a little bit again, try and get through this. This is going to be a rough one to get through. Cuomo interjects with his, opinion quite often in this, so I'm sure that'll come up again.
We can talk about the legal rights and the facts. I want to talk about not having a right, but whether or not something is right
We
first.
can talk about the facts,
which
but
is,
I'd rather talk about
how do you
this.
feel about becoming the face of political resistance to the Black Lives Matter movement?
So
First of all,
off,
that's completely
pause real quick.
ridiculous.
That doesn't matter. The fact that people are using video of him doing something that was right to push a political narrative, whether that narrative is right or wrong, doesn't matter. That's not his fault. Why is Chris Cuomo trying to put blame on him when his actions weren't wrong, but because someone else is using video of his actions to support their argument? Why is that wrong?
Yeah, and so the way he phrased that too is that you're the face of it. How do you feel about that? So remember that Cuomo just said that in about 9.5 minutes towards the end of this interview, Chris Cuomo will reiterate that point, but he uses a different word. He will, and we will say it, I will replay this 4 or 5 times just so you can hear it in your head and get it into your head that this is what Cuomo thinks of this guy and thinks of any of you that are not all about having your cities burned down. Anybody who doesn't want their cities burned down, this is what Chris Cuomo thinks about you. He will reiterate that point at the end of this video, and he will say, you are the face of white resistance. Of white resistance. That's something.
Aren't there a lot of black people who are also opposed to their communities being burned down? Are they also white resistance?
Yes. Well, that's how the left views it. Is if you're not a black body that has a black voice, then it doesn't matter. If you're a black body that is participating in the system, you are now white. Race has become a concept. It's
Yeah, I would be a little offended if someone was describing me as a white body or a black body rather than, a person. I don't know.
But it's a Marxist thing. There's just so many bodies everywhere that they get a little confused.
These ones are alive? What do we do? Why do we have that?
I don't understand.
They should have starved.
Yes.
Movement.
First of all, that's a completely ridiculous statement. I'm not the face.
Becoming the face of political resistance to the Black Lives Matter movement.
First of all, that's a completely ridiculous statement. I'm not the face of anything opposing the Black Lives Matter movement. I was a person scared for my life who was protecting my wife, my home, my hearth, my livelihood. I was a victim of a mob that came through the gate. I didn't care what color they were. I didn't care what their motivation was. I was frightened, I was assaulted, and I was in imminent fear that they would run me over, kill me, burn my house. And you have to have this in the context of St. Louis, where on June the 2nd of this year, I watched the city burn. I watched the 7-Eleven get smashed in, looted, and burned for 40 minutes on live television with nobody showing up to do anything. And I realized at that time we're on our own. When bad things happen, they unpredictably turn really bad, real fast. That same night, retired St. Louis Police Captain David Dorn was murdered. These things get very bad very quickly. And when those people came through the gate, when it was a mob, I didn't take the time to see their birth certificates or anything else. I was defending my house, my life, my wife, and what I've spent 32 years building there.
I understand
He
what you
needs to
say.
slow
your rationale
down.
is.
Jeez
To be clear,
Louise.
What's that?
He needs to slow down a little bit and think about his words a little more clearly. He made a few screw-ups, but still, his point is taken. But also, what's with saying his hearth? Is that a regular phrase? Protecting my hearth?
I mean, like your home's a hearth. It's more of an archaic word. It's more of like
from a different generation.
yeah. It's certainly fallen out of use, but I mean, hearth would be your like home. It'd be like a homestead.
Right.
It's Old English, Dyer. It's from
I get it.
From the Wild West. Well, we're back in the Wild West, so we need to revive some of that
You're
terminology.
right. We gotta start going back down because they are trying to regress us into the into the past. They want segregation again. So
he's his vocabulary is it's too expensive for us to grasp, Dyer.
no, I grasp it. I just think it's like, who says that anymore?
People who have more money than us. That's the income gap is words.
did anything happen to you or your property?
Did anything happen? Yeah, my life has been ruined.
No, we'll get to that, Mr. McCloskey. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm saying that
Threats
night,
against your life.
did anything happen to you, your family, or your property?
Did anything happen to you? Yes, my life was ruined. No, I asked if anything happened to you.
To you.
Jesus.
Yes,
God.
yes. They threatened my life.
But I'm saying that night, did anything happen to you, your family, or your property?
Yeah, it's called social intimidation. It's called terrorism. Chris, what's the definition of terrorism? To use violence and intimidation to frighten the public. That's what was happening that night. It's what happened to me, and that's the damage I suffered.
You were the one
And
pointing a loaded weapon at a group of people who were walking past looking for the mayor's house as a point of protest.
No, I'm doing this. Chris, that's an entirely false concept. No single media outlet has ever mentioned the complete falsity of that statement. The mayor's house cannot be reached through my neighborhood. Lyda Cruson lives up on a road called Lake and Washington. That's 3 blocks north and a half a mile west of my house.
So where do you think they were going?
They were going through a private neighborhood for the intention of going through a private neighborhood, in my humble opinion. In retrospect, at the time I didn't have any time to think about this. However, the leader of the entity called Expect Us that organized this, whatever it was, announced ahead of time that he does not want to have a peaceful protest. He wants to have it be as disruptive as possible. And when interviewed subsequently, he said, I know it was illegal, I know it was a private neighborhood, but when you're doing protests of this nature, it's necessary to break the law to get your ends met. And that's what was happening. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew was that hundreds of people screaming, shouting, angry, broke through the private gate. Everything inside that gate is private property.
Right.
Any pretense of protest as opposed to terrorism ended when they.
What's that?
I was helping him finish the word protest.
You know,
Sorry.
I do agree with you that he's not very well spoken, not as well spoken as I would expect a lawyer to be. But
so he's panicked though. That's why he's talking like he's panicked, and he's got a rehearsed thing he's trying to say, but he's trying to say it way too fast, and he's not thinking through it as he talks.
Well, he's also setting up. This is essentially, from a legal perspective, he's essentially doing his opening arguments, or what will be his lawyer's opening arguments if this goes to court for some reason, and that has to be always in a self-defense situation in court. It is typically advised that you start off with that you were scared, why you were scared, and then just keep reiterating that you were scared.
Yeah. And I get why he's nervous, because he's also or nervous and in a rush, because Cuomo is a hostile interviewer and he has very little time he's going to be given to actually make his points, and he wants to get the most poignant stuff out. So he's trying to talk fast to get all the information out. But when you talk fast and in a like nervous like this, you lose a lot of the clarity of the point you're trying to make.
But you do see. So what he was just explaining there, though, was that Cuomo was saying, well, they were trying to get to the mayor's house, and that's what all the media's been been
Yeah,
reporting.
which
and he said, well, that's not where the mayor's house is. Is it? Am I supposed to believe that CNN doesn't have Google Maps and couldn't have figured that out on their own? That they had to continue on with that lie? That either they were lying or that they were just incompetent. I mean, they have how many billions of dollars in this entity, and they can't do a Google Maps for the mayor's address from his address and figure out like, oh, that is strange.
There's two options. Basically, option one is that they're incompetent in this. They went to one of the protesters, and the went with the first explanation from the protesters / rioters about their innocent circumstance. They're like, oh, yeah, there's an explanation. That's what they were doing. Let's just go with that. Let's not think critically about it at all. That's incompetent journalism. Or let's go with the more likely answer is they don't care about the truth. They care about their narrative, and they're intentionally lying to you, as they've done on many other stories. And they get mad when Trump points it out, and they point out when he points out the Black Mirror false reality that CNN tries to create with their narratives. And they're like, that, Trump is evil for pointing out our lies, but this is a great example of it.
That hurts great apathy on YouTube, but I appreciate it anyways.
What?
Says Fox, you are not well spoken on the spot, but you are still amazing. Thank you. I'm crying on the inside. So I definitely agree with you. What I think will be interesting is in a little bit here. So Cuomo just said, he just admitted that he knew that the intent of the protest was to find the mayor's house, right? In a few minutes, coming up shortly, Cuomo will say, well, they were there in your neighborhood to protest police brutality. And this guy will say, no, and you know that that's not true because you just said that they were there looking for the mayor, which might be, that might be an ancillary issue to police brutality, but they were not there protesting police brutality. They were there looking for the mayor. And Chris Cuomo knows that. And we know Chris Cuomo knows that because he just said it, but he's going to flip-flop on what their motivation was here in a little bit. Because he's such a great guy.
Protest as opposed to terrorism ended when they broke through that gate.
Terrorism is a strong word, Counselor, don't you think? I mean, let's stipulate for the point of this conversation, Chris, that they went through the private. Look, I let you make your points. Let the rejoinders happen, and then you can go.
Sure. Sure.
You got counsel with you. You're safe, I promise. The idea that they broke the law, I give it to you. They went through a private gate. I'm sure you have video of it, or somebody can prove that. I stipulate they went through the gate. But they're yelling, they're angry. They did not go up your steps. They didn't go to your house. They didn't touch you. They didn't try to enter your home. They didn't try to do anything to your kids. But you say you were assaulted. You're using the civil definition of that, which is that you had the apprehension that something bad was going to happen to you. But nothing did. But to call terrorism, when the people are there protesting how the community is treated by the police, is a little bit of reverse psychology at a minimum, is it not?
No. You're absolutely wrong. The reason why they did not get up my steps was that my wife and I were there with weapons to keep them off our steps.
Nailed it.
How do you know?
Because they.
How does he know? How does Chris Cuomo know?
were
and
coming
you don't
at
need
us
to
until
know. You have the right to be there and have your guns out to protect yourself. You have the right to do it whether they've gone on there and done damage something already or not.
Yes.
The standard isn't they have to first have harmed you or destroy your property for you to then have the right to defend yourself.
And so we know that one of the ways that the left operates is they try to forget history before 5 minutes ago, and they'll just out of context, like, well, how did this thing? It just happened. It's probably the Republicans, even though Democrats have been running these cities for 50 years. And in this situation, Chris Cuomo is forgetting the history of literally 60 seconds ago when this guy, Chris Cuomo, was like, well, how do you know that they were going to do that? This guy just explained he watched for a month them burning down every city in America, burning down St. Louis, killing a cop. He watched all of billions of dollars of destruction. He just explained how he was pretty sure they weren't going to intend to do that to his house. And Chris Cuomo was just like, well, I don't remember that because that was an entire 60 seconds ago. So explain to me how you would possibly know that. And again, that was that part that I was just explaining where Chris Cuomo about 30 seconds ago just said, well, they were there looking for the mayor, and then just now he goes, well, they were there protesting police brutality. It got to be one or the other, buddy. Got to be one or the other. And it's just you forget the history of even the last sentence just to maintain the upper ground. The left is it is verbal judo, and it is impossible to argue with them because they are not arguing in good faith. They are just sending word salad at you, just trying to get you to trip up, and there's no coherence to it.
Yep.
The weapon was that my wife and I were there with weapons to keep them off our steps.
How do you know?
Because they were coming at us until I displayed the weapon, and that stopped them. I came out.
So
on
do
the
you?
wing
Wait, I'm sure a
of my-
house
wait,
like
stop.
that. I'm sure a house like
Chris.
that has cameras. Do you have video of them coming up the steps and being in your house?
I'm not going to discuss the level of my private security on national television.
Oh,
that's not a topic.
But do you have proof of them actually
like-
approaching your house?
You know, Chris, this is not a Black Lives Matter movement issue. This is a matter of not just one discussion that we have to have. You said we have to have a discussion, and we do. And every melanin-challenged old white man like me needs to listen and hear the message of Black Lives Matter. What the second part of this discussion is, and it's not mutually exclusive, is the rights, constitutional rights, of each and every citizen in this land that can't be compromised without recognizing that the message of Black Lives Matter will cease to have any meaning at all.
But who is
Because
breaking?
without it, we have anarchy.
But how does that justify what happened here?
I will just go ahead and say, I've watched this 3 times now. I have no idea what the hell he's saying.
What he's trying to say.
This is just 2 supposed lawyers who are awful at explaining
So
stuff.
inarticulate. It's hilarious.
Again, just totally aside from what the main issue is here, I just cannot imagine being like a lay juror that like maybe has a college degree, maybe has only a high school education, maybe it's just a high school dropout. And I'm sitting in a jury box listening to these 2 explain stuff about whatever the case might be, and just having no clue what they're saying.
Okay, I give you that both these supposed lawyers, these wonderful orators, right, were completely inarticulate. But I can tell you what he's trying to say.
Go for it.
He's trying to say that 2 things can be true at the same time. First, it can be true that Black Lives Matter, the statement is true, and also you can believe that, but also believe in maintaining the rights of every other American. Those things are not mutually exclusive. That's what he's trying to say.
Yeah, and the left does that quite a bit. Well, they will set up these false dichotomies of, well, it's like Black Lives Matter. It's like, okay, hey, I don't think that it's okay to burn down buildings. Well, why don't you support Black Lives Matter? I didn't say that. I think that it's, every American has the right to self-defense. Why don't you support Black Lives Matter? I didn't say that. That's what Cuomo's doing here. That's like the bread and butter for how the left has conversations in general. And they're trying to do that. And I guess, your much more elegant phrasing than his. I mean, this interview is 10.5 minutes. I think it could have been done in like 4.
Yes, it could have been. Very easily. Every time someone asks me about Black Lives Matter, which happens more often than I'd like to say, I always have to start off with saying, okay, there's 2 things. There's the phrase Black Lives Matter and what that means, and then there is the group of people who and the movement of Black Lives Matter and their associated actions. And if you're asking me, do I support the actions of that violent rioting mob? It's very different than asking me do I agree with the statement. Because I believe all lives matter, so I have no problem saying that, yes, Black Lives Matter, because I think that all people have value, and that your skin color is not what determines that value.
Yeah, so this is what the I guess the more intellectual I guess the English majors have been calling it, is a Black Lives Matter is a semantically loaded phrase. or it's like a semantically overloaded. Maybe I think I might be messing up that definition. But basically, what it means is it's a phrase where on the surface it means one thing with the words, but the ideas it conveys are different. So just on its surface, lowercase Black Lives Matter, of course. On the going a little bit deeper though, when people say Black Lives Matter, they're talking about the organization that is run by self-avowed Marxists and has people that are going out there and burning stuff down, rioting, are associated with Antifa, pulling down statues, killing people, all kinds of stuff. That is what they're trying to get you to agree to both. But if you disagree with the Marxist aspect of it, they're going to try and spin that on you and say, well, why don't you agree that Black Lives Matter? And you're going to say, well, I do agree that Black Lives Matter. They're like, okay, so why don't you support them pulling down the statues? And they just keep switching it back and forth because they're using these phrases that mean extra stuff, and the left will just keep flipping that definition until you can't keep track of it, and they're going to try and make it sound like you're a racist. Basically, everything is you're a racist.
So basically,
how it always works.
My explanation I give before I can answer the question will only matter if I'm speaking to someone who's rational and wants to know my position on it. If you're talking to an actual Black Lives Matter, Marxist, it doesn't matter to them. They won't be able to see through the rhetoric. If you say you're opposed to just the actions of the group, they're still going to translate that to, even though you just finished saying that you think that Black Lives Matter and that's not the problem, it's only the actions of the group. They're going to say, "Oh, so you're a Nazi."
Yes.
Because they don't have rational thought, because they had it, they couldn't maintain their belief system.
The clicking is just in your head, Howitzer. No one's clicking their mouse except for Dyer. Alrighty. Okay, we'll keep trudging through this.
Counselor, I'm not saying that he didn't have a right to say that they entered a private street, but they were protesting, and he has become the face. How so? The president retweeted this for a reason, Counselor.
He became the face involuntarily.
But I'm not saying it was voluntary. I'm saying, why do you think the president retweeted it, Counselor?
What's that?
It matters if it was voluntary or not. It's a very big difference. You can't blame someone for the actions of someone else. So he's like just brushing that off like it doesn't matter.
So this is about to be about another completely incoherent exchange. But what they are basically going over is Cuomo is trying to ask these guys, why do they think that Trump retweeted the video of this happening? And they're both like, I don't know why Trump retweeted it. Why would you ask us? We don't know. So that's what's going to mostly be going on for about the next 60 seconds. But it is, again, a little incoherent. Not even Cuomo can follow it. So he's very, very smart.
All night, you're going to let me answer.
I just asked you a question. Answer it. Why do you think the president retweeted it?
Oh, that's a separate question.
No, that's the one I'm asking.
Well, that's a second question.
Maybe you should ask the president.
Here, you should ask the president.
He doesn't answer my questions, but he answers by his actions.
I'm not going to speak for the president. In fact, quite frankly, I find it probably an impossibility for anyone to speak for the president. And that's assuming one wants to say the president speaks.
I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Mr. McCloskey, this is what I'm saying. The president retweeted this thing for a reason. Why do you think he retweeted it?
You know, I don't have any idea why the president retweeted it.
You know, it's funny.
I know what he means.
It's funny. Cuomo was just saying, how do you know what the intent of these rioters were outside your house? And then Cuomo was like, you couldn't possibly know what their intent was. And then he immediately goes into, can you speculate on what Orange Man's intent was in tweeting?
Isn't that funny? Like, also, that's terribly ironic that he goes from he's going the complete opposite argument. First, he's assuming that they know the intent. They say it's impossible for them to know the intent of the rioters, but then he must know the intent of the president. It's completely contradictory. But then what's even funnier is that this lawyer here, what he was trying to do was disparage Trump's speaking ability, saying that he's incoherent, so you can't really say he's actually speaking because he's so incoherent he can't speak. That's pretty funny. Because you're incoherent. You have been the entire interview.
Yes. Yes, Howitzer. He's asking why Trump retweeted something because Cuomo is the most pathetic news anchor in the universe. He's so bad at his job. It is it is of so little importance why Trump retweeted a video of this guy defending his house that has absolutely no relevance to anything. And you'll see why Cuomo's bringing that up, though, because we're getting towards the end of this, about 2 minutes left. But coming up soon here, like I said earlier, Cuomo is going to say that this guy represents white resistance. And so what Cuomo was trying to do this whole interview was say, basically the story he's trying to do is you were resisting Black Lives Matter because you don't think Black Lives Matter. You were trying to intimidate them with guns. And you did that because of Trump, and Trump supports you because he retweeted you, and Trump retweeted you because you are a white resistor. And so everyone's a white nationalist. I know that sounds a little incoherent, and it is, intentionally so, but that is what Cuomo is trying to do. He's trying to set up this narrative here. He's taking an awfully long 10 minutes to do it, but that's where this is going. So that will, again, keep listening for that spot where he says, you are the face of white resistance, and it's just really amazing.
I've not seen it, not seen the retweet. I think you ought to ask the president, and if he I was reluctant to come on your.
He deleted it.
I was reluctant to come on your show for a
What
similar
was
reason.
so
Let me say this:
upset
you
about
said
this
it was
Twitter?
protesting police brutality. That's absolutely inaccurate. The announced purpose for this event was to ask the mayor, Lyda Krewson, whose own husband was murdered in her driveway in that same house years ago, in front of her and her kids. Okay, that's how undangerous these things are. The alleged purpose of this event was to ask her to resign for doxing protesters.
Right.
But guess what? Have I been doxed? Have those very people that were walking down my street screaming death threats at me and threatening to burn my house and kill my dog, and what rooms in my house they were going to live in after they killed me? Do you think them then distributing my information all over the Western Hemisphere is different than what they're asking the mayor to resign for doing? This hypocrisy is just obvious nonsense.
Look, again, Mr. McCloskey, I don't like that you have been weaponized for political means. I'm not saying that you weren't within your rights to do what you were doing.
What would be more importantly? Why do you say I don't like that you're getting death threats and that people are threatening your family and I guess your dog?
Well, so Cuomo's trying to like bootstrap the idea that this guy is the face of white nationalist resistance against Black Lives Matter. That's what Chris Cuomo's trying to do. He's trying to like, by asking him these questions and pretending like this is a thing that everybody thinks, he's trying to create the situation. And so he's saying like, well, no, I know it's not your fault that you're the face of white nationalism, but like you are the face of white nationalism. So like, don't you think it's important that you don't say that you're a white nationalist? That's what's going on here. It's this idea that you're always going to be a racist. You're always going to be unable to defend yourself. And Cuomo's just sitting there, it's like, well, when did you stop being a white nationalist? I'm sorry that you're a white nationalist. It's not your fault, but it's absolutely mad. Cuomo is, again, awful human being.
Are you sure he's a human being? At this point, he might just be a monster.
And this is like the most Chris Cuomo that I've actually watched at a stretch. I did not realize how bad he was at his job. He's really awful. We'll back this up here a little bit and try and get through this.
Hypocrisy is just obvious nonsense.
Look, again, Mr. McCloskey, I don't like that you have been weaponized for political means. I'm not saying that you weren't within your rights to do what you were doing. That will be judged by the system. That's not why I'm having you on the show. As I said at the top, and you said I didn't want to come on the show. Listen, I think I'm fair. I'm not going to use you as a pawn to advance my own agenda like the show you just went on.
You are.
Which is where
So he's talking about Tucker.
somebody wants people to see Black Lives Matter as inimical to the American cause. I don't make those kinds of judgments for people. But the guy who just walked past your house on the looping piece of video had hands up, don't shoot on this. The stated purpose of this demonstration, and that's all we can go on, is that they didn't like that the mayor outed, or as you say, doxed people who were...
It's incredible that the hands up, don't shoot is
Still a thing.
still being discussed that was the first hate crime hoax of like this whole era was the idea of hands up, don't shoot. That has been debunked. That was the lie of hands up, don't shoot was the entire founding of Black Lives Matter. And it is false. It has been shown unequivocally false in 2 court cases. Multiple witnesses. Black eyewitnesses. It did not happen. We know it didn't happen. And here we are 5 years later, Chris Cuomo saying, well, hands up, don't shoot. It's a real thing. Like,
still acting like it's a real thing.
And then Chris saying, well, I'm not trying to use you like a pawn the way that Tucker was. We just watched the Tucker interview. Did Tucker try to use this guy as a pawn, or did he just say, like, what happened to you? Explain to me what happened. This guy was like, this bad thing happened to me. I tried to defend myself. And Tucker was like, that sucks, man. They're doing you dirty. That's basically the Tucker interview. Tucker wasn't spinning a narrative about it. He was just explaining what was going on. And it was, on its face, absurd. We could all see just Tucker asking him, explain to us what happened. Explain to us what the media is doing to you. It was just visibly absurd. And Tucker didn't have to do any of these weasel word discussions and trying to trick you gotcha questions like Cuomo did. Tucker just asked him questions, explain to me what happened. Yeah, of course it's your right to defend yourself. Why is the media doing that to you? Of course you're scared that, you see this burning down the city for a month and then they come to your house. That makes sense. And then Cuomo's saying, well, I'm not trying to use you as a pawn. And again, linking to what Chris Cuomo has been saying earlier is that, this guy's the face of the resistance. He's the white face, the white resistance of Black Lives Matter. Cuomo's basically saying like, well, I'm not trying to use you as a pawn. You just are being used as a pawn. You just are being weaponized as a white face. You are the white nationalists are using you. And he's just trying to label this guy as a symbol of white nationalism, of white resistance against blackness. And it's really outrageous because he's saying, I'm not doing this thing that I'm currently doing.
Yeah. He lives in a crazy alternate world.
I find myself getting tripped up on my words here trying to explain this just because I think that you could like teach an entire like semester college course on semantics just based off this 10-minute video, trying to like untangle the words that Cuomo's using and the rhetorical tricks that he's using and the back and forth doublespeak that he's using. I think that you could just break down this entire video and just go over it for like a whole semester, maybe 2 semesters. But we're trying to blast through it in 2 hours, so.
2 hours?
Well, it's hour 1 already, so.
We've been at this for an
that
hour.
they didn't like that the mayor outed, or as you say, doxed people who were for defunding the police. And now you can like that or not like that, but you have been used and politically weaponized as a face of white resistance to that movement. And that's why I asked you that. Not because that's how you see yourself, but that's how you're being seen. And I wanted to give you a chance with...
Being seen by who? Being seen by who? So we'll play that over again. I said I was going to replay that bit. So, you are the face of white resist. Jeez. It's not your fault. You just are. It's just, it's not your fault. You just can't help it because you're white. You're just
under whose interpretation? Because there's a lot of conservatives who are not white who are also sharing this example as being, these people finally standing up to these protesters and not letting their homes be burned down. Finally, someone's not letting themselves be a victim. That's not just a white thing. It's resistance to tyranny. That's what it is.
Well, and it's again, like I said, Chris Cuomo is trying to like bootstrap this idea by asking the question that presumes that this guy is being used as a symbol of like white nationalism against Black Lives Matter. It doesn't exist, but by asking the question, Cuomo's trying to pretend that it exists. It's the idea of, when did you stop hitting your wife? Or maybe it's, you just go up to a random girl. I mean, from this perspective, it's like, hey, it really sucks that your husband beats you, but like, it's not your fault. And she's like, what are you talking about? He doesn't beat me. He's not doing that to me. It's like, no. You're just a victim in all this. It's okay. That's what Cuomo's doing here. He's asking a question where the prior is not in evidence. Cuomo, the prior being that this guy's being held up as a symbol of white resistance. No, that's not anywhere. No one's doing that. And Cuomo is just presuming that that's the case by asking the question. And then this guy has to justify why he's the face of white resistance when that's not what's actually happening.
Yeah, when in reality, that's just the narrative they're trying to create. They're trying to make the news, not report the news.
Yes.
People who were for defunding the police. And now you can like that or not like that, but you have been used and politically weaponized as a face of white resistance to that movement. White resistance, white resistance.
And I want to link that back again to the earlier part when he was talking about Trump retweeting this guy. I think what Cuomo is trying to imply here is that Trump is using this guy as the face of white resistance because Trump is a white nationalist, as we all know. That's what's going on here. And as you said, Dyer, it's trying to create the news that does not exist.
Right. It is an existing formula. Like, okay, has happened. Some sort of event has happened. Now we have to find how could this be something bad about Trump? Find the way that becomes a negative against Trump. That's what this is.
Do you want to talk more about what you talked about at the beginning of the show, which I was kind of trying to get you to save it up for this part, was I brought this up that Cuomo was going to say white resistance, and you said, well, there's a lot of not white people that are kind of not a fan of crap getting burned down by BLM
or being killed.
Yeah. I mean, you want to speak more to that?
Sure. Yeah. I think I already kind of said it, but I mean, it's the black community that suffered the most in all of this. It is mostly black-owned businesses that were destroyed, mostly black people even that were attacked in the streets by these rioters. There's a lot of conservatives and he's just not even liberals who just like to have stores to go to, like having homes that burned down, like having communities that have been destroyed. A lot of people who are opposed to what the group Black Lives Matter are doing. And they also, there's black people and other people of other groups, all groups, that have been arming themselves to protect their storefronts and protect their communities. And there's this great picture of it's not a gated community, it was just a community. And there was at the entrance to it, there was a bunch of people, black and white, with guns that were protecting it. And that was in, I believe, Minneapolis, in one of the suburbs. And this shows it's not a racial thing, but they're trying to make it so that anyone who criticizes the tyrannical, radical violence of this group and say, oh, you're only opposed to this violence if you're a racist, rather than you actually, the story is you're a patriot who loves your community.
This is one of the most blatant attempts at creating the situation for a race war that I've ever seen from CNN. Now, certainly CNN has been at the forefront of championing the feelings that have led to the current situation where racial tensions are pretty high. But this is like one of the most naked attempts by labeling this guy as white resistance to Black Lives Mattering. That's what he's saying here. That's some next level attempt at trying to stir up race relations. And it reminds me very much so of the Covington case, where CNN and all the other media agencies, they picked up on the Covington kids and forced them to become the symbols, or tried to purport that these were the symbols of white nationalist extremism, that these kids, and it didn't exist. It wasn't a real story. Nobody thought that, but CNN just reported it as fact. These kids are the symbols of white nationalism, and they're what's wrong with everything in society. And then they're doing it again with this guy, saying like, well, you're the symbol of white nationalism. Nobody else is saying that other than CNN. CNN is reporting on a thing that does not exist in an attempt to get it to exist.
Yes. And what happens when you are spinning this narrative that it's white resistance, it's white people fighting back against black people, you're creating more fear and racism on both sides. some people who actually think that CNN is credible in any possible way will feel like they're more under attack by white people than they would have felt otherwise, because this is a non-existent narrative. Like you said, it's something they're saying exists, but isn't. It's not a huge group of white nationalists who are praising these individuals and showing their videos and pictures because of their support for white nationalism, but because Cuomo is saying that any support for or any showing of or praising of these people's actions is a support for white nationalism. Now, those people who believe CNN will see all of the memes, all the people talking about them positively online, and assume that their motive is not the true motive of, oh, look, we support people defending themselves because we feel like our country has been under attack by violent radicals, and we just like to see people stand up to the violent radicals. Now the water's been poisoned in those people's minds that believe CNN is in any way credible. They're going to think anytime they see those memes, it's actually a dog whistle support for white nationalism.
Yep.
To that movement, as a face of white resistance to that movement. And that's why I asked you that, not because that's how you see yourself, but that's how you're being seen. And I wanted to give you a chance with counsel to respond to that. I don't see, I don't see how you could see that as an unfair question.
My client has, since the very outset of this publicity, made it really, really clear the last thing he wanted to do, and he and his wife are both appalled at the prospect of being utilized as a rallying call for people sitting in Barco loungers with a Confederate flag behind them and a 12 gauge in their hand.
I do love that this lawyer, just the disgusting irony of it, saying like somebody in the South using their right to bear arms. I don't want my client that is a right, this is a right to bear arms case. I don't think that the people of the South should have the right to bear arms. Like, yeah, like I said earlier, I kind of wish this had been like a moderate middle class couple that this happened to, just for the optics of it. This is not it's not the hero that we needed. It's the hero that we deserve, I think.
Yeah, but that's not really helping your argument. Like you're disparaging people having weapons.
Yeah, like I don't want other Second Amendment advocates to look at my client and see him as a rallying cry. Like that scares us. Like, all right, guys, come on.
Wow.
My clients have fought as lawyers for 3+ decades for the civil rights of people of color. My clients are completely behind and endorse the message of BLM. What they are not capable of doing is embracing the abject utilization of that noble message that we all need to hear over and over and over again as a license to rape, rob, pillage, bowl over all of our rights for a
None
man
of that
to have
happened
to
here,
worry.
by the way.
Oh, I beg your pardon. When you have a man and a wife on their property in their home in a full-on assault occurring by a
full-on
mob.
assault.
That,
They're walking
by the
down
way,
the street in front of the house, Mr. Watkins.
I beg
Chris,
your pardon. That's not correct.
Chris,
you don't have your facts
Chris,
correct.
I'm
You
just
were
looking
not
at
there.
the video.
I don't know why CNN decided to cut that on their own channel, but they did, and I couldn't find any more of it. But I think we know where that was going.
Yes.
I did think it was interesting towards the end there where he said, it's Black Lives Matter is something that we need to hear over and over again, but I don't want that to be a license for raping and pillaging and all and burning and stuff like that down. And I don't disagree with that. Again, that using a certain definition of Black Lives Matter, the lowercase version of it, that yes, people that are black, yes, their lives do matter, just like everyone's lives matter. That's why I say all lives matter, because it tends to cover everything. But
more inclusive.
Some people are using Black Lives Matter as a license to rape, be Chaz, and pillage all of America and burn stuff down, and that should not be happening, and that's absolutely the correct statement there. I think that he's not the most appropriate vessel. They could have done better. Yes, Howitzer, that he was essentially implying, we're not the racists. The Deep South is the racist. Like, all right, let's stop throwing stones when you guys are clearly in the glassest of houses.
Oh, jeez. He basically lives in a greenhouse.
Basically. So it's you know, not the best vessels for the cause, but it is the vessels that we have nonetheless. And I don't. I think the this new Chipotle couple, which maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow or Saturday. You guys have probably heard about this Chipotle couple. They were going to Chipotle. I don't know what state it was. The longer video shows a black family harassing them and blocking their car from leaving, and the short video shows a woman holding a gun at a black family, and they're trying to say that was a racist situation, and the longer video shows that the black family was in fact trying to trap them there, and hitting their car, and this family just kind of wanted to leave. But maybe this will be the better case, that will have a better use of self-defense in a situation. This guy, wish him the best of luck. Doesn't deserve to go down for whatever imaginary crime the city of St. Louis is going to try to pin on him for defending his own house. Which actually, important context, in Missouri, there's castle doctrine. So in your castle, which is your house, and your castle includes your lawn, which he was on his lawn, you are allowed to do anything you want on that with your gun. And if somebody sets foot on your lawn and you did not want them there, castle doctrine says you are free to put a hole in that person, which is how it probably should be all across the nation.
And all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How
Slowpoke
dare
has given
you?
us $2. Slowpoke gave us $2, and he says, we're not racist. You're the racist who's not associating these violent people with BLM. Yes, I think. But that is important context. So the important context is that they were well within their legal right to be having their weapons out and brandished. Maybe not maybe it was morally incorrect to be waving around so like that. I think they should probably go get some training. They certainly have enough money.
Yeah. All that money and not enough money for some classes, right?
Yeah. But
couldn't buy some trigger discipline.
Yeah. So that is their right. And then there's been a lot of other people who've kind of commented that the gun sales are through the roof recently, and there's a lot of people out there that are first-time gun buyers, first-time gun owners, and they have no idea how to use those things. Maybe this guy just had one for a while and just never touched it, or maybe he went out and bought one after he saw St. Louis burning down earlier this month. We don't know, but it does seem clear that he's inexperienced with it. And again, a lot of people out there that are inexperienced, and there is a lot of tension. And as he said, normally if there was just kind of a parade of people wandering down your house, wandering down your street, if this was 7 years ago, you might not think anything of it. You might be like, that's weird, I wonder what's going on, and you wouldn't necessarily think immediate danger. But given the current climate, given the history of the last month and the things that have been going on in the last few years leading up to this, that is now, these things that might have been mundane situations in the past now seem a lot more threatening. And maybe they are mundane situations. Maybe you will be in a situation where somebody bumps into you, or there's a parade going down the street, and again, you would have seen that same thing 7 years ago and not thought anything of it. And maybe today, when it happens, it's just as innocuous, but you don't know. You don't know if it is or isn't, because you've got all this news coverage, all of these riots, and all this damage, and all this evidence that currently, when there's a large group of people gathered and they're protesting something, they can very quickly turn into a dangerous situation, just based off current history. So there's going to be a lot more situations where people are fearful of what might happen next, and they might be more quick to brandish their weapon in a situation where maybe it didn't warrant it. And the more often that you are having weapons brandished, the more often shots are going to be fired. And so, it's not necessarily a great thing that we got a lot of people out there that are untrained, but that's easily resolvable. Get training.
I think the problem with getting that the Goldilocks self-defense case is because these Antifa types, these BLM types, they tend to do their most of their destruction of their writing in very Democrat liberal areas where at first you're less likely to have someone who has a weapon because the laws are more strict there, and the people just are less likely to defend themselves.
Well, so you look at the I cannot remember what his name is, but the retired police officer that died in St. Louis that this guy was referencing. So he got shot and killed by I guess BLM protesters or rioters. BLM's got to own that. Had he gotten the drop on the guy instead and killed the guy that killed him, the story would have been former police officer continues to hunt black teens. And that would have been the story, and it would have been, he would have probably gone on some kind of press tour and been like, well, I was in fear for my life, and then CNN would have been, how do you know? How do you know that they were going to come after you? You're just out there hunting down black people. And so we see when you do wait, he died. I think that this couple saw that, and they're like, well, I guess I'll take my chances in court because I know what the alternative is going to be. There's going to be a lot of people doing that math, but CNN, they're not gonna cry over you dying, but they will attack you to the end of the earth if you defend yourself. I think that's really the moral of today's show. Is there's not really any winning from this, but personally, I'll take my chances in court.
Yeah, I would rather to deal with a jury and a judge than have to throw my life away because I was not willing to act when threatened. So that's why it's harder to get the a good example of a self-defense case, because even the people in those areas, those very liberal areas, their laws tend not to benefit the person who's the gun owner, and you can get prosecuted for self-defense cases in those areas more easily. Like in California, you basically have to have already been mortally wounded for you to have the right to use the firearm.
Which needs to be, well, actually, there was an opportunity for that to get declared unconstitutional in the last few weeks here. And while the Supreme Court has been making a myriad of decisions that are, the right is generally unhappy with most of them. I'm unhappy with slightly fewer of them. Be that as it may, they did have the opportunity to review I forget what it's called, but it wasn't actually a case, but there's some kind of legal maneuver, and somebody proposed basically a paper that said that these certain gun laws in places like California were unconstitutional. I can't remember the exact way that it worked, but basically the Supreme Court had the opportunity to review it, and they could have made a decision, even though it wasn't a real case, and it would have really massively expanded and reconstitutionalized a lot of the gun legislation that is at the state level. It would have made the Second Amendment more of a de facto standard and stopped these state legislatures from overriding it. But the Supreme Court, instead of doing that, instead of reviewing that, instead of making a decision on it, decided to pass and did not look at it. So that was an opportunity that we had recently that is now gone and has no set date for when it's going to be reviewed again. But that is something that needs to happen. There needs to be a more clear-cut self-defense. I think that's a very obvious interpretation of the Second Amendment as it is meant for self-defense, as is your God or universe given right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. So I don't know. I don't know where this all leads, but yeah, that self-defense case is going to be difficult to find because if you defend yourself, well, nothing happened. But that's because you defended yourself. If you don't defend yourself, maybe you die. And then CNN doesn't care.
Pursuit of happiness. But yes, I get your point.
Yes. You know the thing. So, there was, I believe the new stats are something like 8.5 million new gun buys in the last month, and it was like 2 million.
And only half of them were me.
Yeah, and only 2 million new gun owners. Or yeah, it was about 2 million new gun owners, which is quite a lot of. Well, I guess some of those could have been to people who already owned firearms. But do you think that seems to be like they keep talking about how Trump's down in the polls. Like, have they polled gun owners? I mean, that's got to be a guaranteed 2 million votes for Trump, right?
I mean, if I got polled whether or not I supported Trump or not, I would definitely lie in that poll.
Well, no. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, regardless of the polls, I'm talking about, like, what are you going to pull the lever for? Are you going to, if you just bought, for the first time ever, you just bought a gun.
Yeah.
In 4 months from now, are you going to go pull the lever for the guy that's trying to ban AR-16s? Who's going to have,
AR-16s?
That was his thing. He was going to ban AR-16s.
That's what he said? Oh, they were fine then.
You don't remember that? Yeah. And then he was doing he's going to have Beto O'Rourke go up there. Beto saying, "Hell yes, we're coming for your AR-15s. Hell yes, we're going to take all your guns." And Biden said, I'd like to have him on my cabinet.
They can't agree on which AR then, because Beto said 15 and he said 16.
Oh yeah. So
I guess that there's some internal conflict there. We'll have to resolve that.
Yeah, I would agree, Howitzer. I would not tell them the truth. So you don't know, and this is what's been explained, is people maybe don't know who's calling. I think it's reasonable to assume that it's not a polling place that's calling you. You've got the left that is out there actively trying to dox people and like harass them and burn their crap down. I would not put it past the left, which is very well funded. Very, very well funded, especially now that they've got I think they're up at like $500 million just disappearing into the Black Lives Matter hole. But some of that money could go into a call center that is faking doing polling and really just looking for Trump supporters to go harass. I would say if you get a phone call and they're saying, we're doing a poll, do you support Donald Trump? I would say, yeah, that's funny, and then just hang up. I would not answer that at all or lie, because you just don't know who's calling you.
Well, I might be a chaotic evil because I would definitely lie to them, and I will laugh internally about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of secretly want to test your doggo defense system. You're like, come on, dog food's expensive. If I just get some Antifa over here, that's like a whole week if I don't have to buy dog food.
Nah, they're pretty filled with soy. They're not very...
Yeah, do you think your dogs would even eat it? And be like, ugh, gross
I think
vegetables.
Even they have standards, all right?
Yeah. Dad, this is not edible. This is filled with soy. Why do you hate me?
But there are some really fat feminists in Antifa that are just more like land whales. Maybe they won't eat them, but you can definitely get a lot of lamp oil from them.
Yes. That's how Dyer's house is lit with lamp oil. Very, very dangerous, but it's classic. All right. Do you have any other closing shots on that?
No, I think my beginning point and my ending point is two parallel but completely contradictory realities in America right now. And I'm not going to say that Fox News is always right, but in this case, I'd say that their version of reality is a lot closer to what's real. And it's a pretty stark difference. And just try to imagine what kind of person would watch CNN and believe all these things to be true, and what kind of state of mind that person would be in. If Trump wins the election, they're going to believe that Hitler has been elected for a second term, and I think the violence will only get worse. Well, they're egging it on. They're trying to break the race war.
I believe it was as of today, Trump said he's sending out special task forces, DOJ stuff, and strike teams to go guard monuments for the 4th. And they're actually, he wasn't kidding last week. They are starting to round up Antifa leaders and charge them under the, I forget what it's called. It's the National Monument Defense thing. Whether or not they're going to get the 10 years or not, I think that remains to be seen. Certainly would like to see that.
That's the highest they could get.
Yeah.
I doubt they'll get. They'll probably plead out.
Yeah.
Their gut.
So, but they are doing something, and you've said that the middle path, where we don't just fall to communism and we don't have to have some kind of like right authoritarian rise up, that the middle ground is just enforce the laws as they are on the books, and we can stay on the middle path. We don't have to have an extreme collapse to one side or the other. Maybe that's what Trump's doing right now, and I don't disagree with you. I just questioned whether or not that was actually going to happen. Hopefully that's what Trump's doing now. And hopefully that continues. And that's how maybe we do get some of this law and order back. And to the extent that these people are having these psychotic breaks from reality where they are actually going clinically insane, and will continue to do so when Trump gets reelected, the solution to that is just enforce the laws. If they are committing crimes, lock them up.
Whether you believe it's going to happen or not, everyone needs to realize that many problems have multiple solutions. But in this one case, the only solution will include, but not be limited to, enforcing the laws as they are, because there will be no solution to this problem if that is not a key component to it. If you do not enforce the laws that are on the books now, and actually remove the violent radicals from the populace, then via hold them accountable for the crimes they committed, not like genocide here, then this will only get worse. It will only spiral into civil war.
Yes.
So,
well,
Trump.
and the here's a bad thought is if the worst happens, we do decay into a civil war. It wouldn't look like the previous one. And I know a lot of people say that I'm going a different direction with
our
that.
Civil War.
I'm going a totally different direction with this.
Okay.
So it would actually look like what it looks like in the Middle East, where there was a civil war, but there was never a resolution to it because the other side wasn't interested in creating a government. They were interested in perpetual revolution and destruction. And that's what the left is right now. That's what Antifa is, the American Taliban. So if we did have some kind of civil war, there wouldn't be a clean end to it where eventually we would be, reformed into a new Antifa-stan country. It would just be perpetual civil war forever, as it is in the Middle East.
Yep.
Which
Not that I think it's going to happen, by the way. I don't think it's the likely case.
Yeah, so I think Civil War is being undersold as to how bad it is, right? It sounds pretty bad, and I'm saying I think that people are underselling how bad it could get.
You didn't have higher expectations. Shoot for the stars. Your revolution could be far better than it currently is. You're limiting yourself. All right. So let's. I think that's it for today, right?
Well, that's it for tomorrow too, because it's tomorrow now. But yes, that's all. That's all we had for the unplanned. This was one of the least planned episodes that we've ever had, even less so than the last time. But
wow, that's it is something. So there's a small chance we'll do a show Saturday, but mostly Sunday, right?
Probably tomorrow.
Oh, Friday. Sorry.
Yes.
All right. We can do a show.
There's some chance that we will do a show in the next week.
we will be on at some point.
Stay.
The show is
tuned.
not over forever.
The show must go on, Dyer.
You'll hear from us again. Don't worry. At some point in the future, unspecified.
We'll be back.
All right. See you guys. Thank you for watching. Dire Wolf out.
See you guys.
See you this time.